How can we change negative narratives around migration, empower migrants to get socially active, and create bonds in a multi-ethnic society? Could volunteering be the solution? We are going to make this work. Volunteers are impassioned, energetic, and know what's going on the ground. But they need support. Cities improve policy, share information, and give funding and coordination. Combine cities and volunteers, and well, you could do something pretty special. That's what's happening in an EU-funded project called Values, led by Eurocities, supported by Migration Work and the Centre for European Volunteering. 2 years, 4 topics, 16 cities. Values. The idea is for cities and volunteer organizations to understand each other, communicate, and cooperate. They are working on 4 communities of practice, studying 1 topic each. They travel, meet locals, meet migrants, meet politicians, meet volunteers, meet each other to work on community building for a welcoming culture, innovative volunteering actions, city and volunteer cooperation in communities, and engaging young migrants in community life. Cities recruit volunteers, fund them, give them free spaces, hook them up with similar organizations, and consult them on policy. Many migrants and locals describe volunteering as one of the most powerful and meaningful experiences of their lives. Our toolkits will share essential lessons, so check out integratingcities.eu. Let's bring that power to every city in Europe.
Power to the cities. Those are good words to kick off this day. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 9th Integrating Cities Conference, a series of events underpinning the Integrating Cities process, which started back in 2006, establishing a partnership between Eurocities and the European Commission to maintain a policy dialogue between the local and the European levels, bringing together cities, civil society, and EU institutions in a multi-stakeholder approach. Now, this is the first time this kind of event happens online, given the inevitable consequences of the lockdown crisis across Europe and indeed across the world. The event, organized by Eurocities and co-hosted by the city of Nuremberg, which you see here, is being held in the framework of the Values Project, looking into volunteering activities to leverage urban and European social integration of migrants. I'm delighted to be your moderator for the next 2 mornings, particularly as this conference occurs at a very timely moment, just days after the publication of the European Commission's Action Plan on Integration and Inclusion, and we'll be hearing more about that from Commissioner Johansson later on, but also because more cities are signing up to the Integrating Cities Charter, which signals the continued ambition of cities to play their role in facilitating the integration of migrants in our communities, despite not being responsible on matters related to their legal status, and this obviously has a huge impact on their possibilities. But we'll have the occasion to discuss this later on. So together we'll be together for 2 hours, and following some opening speeches, we'll have an interactive panel debate on how cities can work effectively with the EU on integration issues. The event is live streamed in English, French, and German, so feel free to select the language channel you prefer. I would also like to introduce you to Sophie Lang. She is an illustrator, and she will be accompanying us throughout the day, and she will be drawing her thoughts as we discuss our thoughts here in the event. So, hello to you, Sophie. Now, I understand that being online for these events is not always very satisfactory, and we would all much prefer being together in the city of Nuremberg, especially as I understand it snowed yesterday, and Nuremberg is particularly beautiful in the winter. But regardless, I really strongly encourage you to engage with us through Twitter, by using the hashtag integrating cities and by tagging also the integrating cities account and the Eurocities account, of course. Now, to the right of the live player, you will also find the Slido tool, which will be accompanying us also during the 2 days. This is where you can drop your questions and your comments, and I will be monitoring those and picking out the most popular questions and integrating them into the debate. So just go ahead, write, like, and I will be using all of that input in our discussion. But before we go into the heart of our event, I would like us to all use this Slido tool and start you off with a nice quiz all about the city of Nuremberg. So I'm just joining now the quiz. You can add your name into the quiz so that you can take part, and I will soon be starting it. It's going to be 5 questions. They will be short and sharp. You need to answer correctly, and you need to answer quickly in order to get the points. I assume that the people from Nuremberg might have a little bit of a competitive advantage, but let's see. You know, this is sport. Sometimes there are some surprises. So, the first question. In which German Länder is Nuremberg located? Is it located in Saxony, in Baden-Württemberg, in Thuringia, in Bavaria, or in Hesse? You have 15 seconds left. Saxony, Baden-Württemberg, Thuringia, Bavaria, or Hesse? So I see that Baden-Württemberg and Bavaria are getting some hits, but indeed the correct answer is Bavaria. So congratulations to you for having got the first points. Now we move to the next question. The next question, when was the city of Nuremberg first mentioned in documented history? Was it in the year 987, in the year 1050, in the year 1132, in the year 1154, or in the year 1286? So, 5 options. We know that it's a historic city, but when was it first mentioned in documented history? So we have our answers, and I will now give you the correct answer. It was first mentioned in documented history in 1050. Now, our next question will be on the approximate size of the population of Nuremberg today. So, how big is Nuremberg? This is the question. Does it have an approximate population of 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, 800,000, or 1 million? 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, 800,000, or 1 million? So we have some good answers, I see, although I won't reveal the correct answer just yet. 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, 800,000, or 1 million, and the correct answer is indeed 500,000. I believe it's the 14th largest city in Germany and the 2nd largest in Bavaria after Munich. Now we go to a little bit of culture for our next question. Which of these famous composers was born in Nuremberg? Ludwig van Beethoven, Johann Pachelbel, Johann Sebastian Bach, Robert Schumann, or Johannes Brahms? Which of these famous composers was born in Nuremberg? Ludwig van Beethoven, Johann Pachelbel, Johann Sebastian Bach, Robert Schumann, or Johannes Brahms? So we have a very strong and active participation, I see. And the correct answer is, in fact, Johann Pachelbel. He is the composer who was born in Nuremberg, and he leaves us with a very famous sound that I'm sure everyone will have heard. And now, the final question, which goes to gastronomy. And we know that Nuremberg is well known for the Nuremberg Bratwurst. Now, you probably will recognize this in the picture, but the question is, how many Nuremberg Bratwurst are produced every day? 200,000, 500,000, 1 million, 2 million, or a whopping 3 million? So how many Nuremberg Bratwurst are produced every day? 200,000, 500,000, 1 million, 2 million, or 3 million? So I see that people are shying a little bit away from the big figure, and I must say that the correct answer, although astonishing, is indeed 3 million. 3 million Nuremberg Bratwurst are produced every day. So if I go to my leaderboard, I see that our top answers are coming from Iris Knopf and Luis Prada and Feyrouz from the Eurocities network. So Iris, congratulations to you. I'm not sure if you're in Nuremberg. I suppose maybe you are, but only time will find out. So thank you very much for taking part. And now that our audience is all psyched up and experts on the city of Nuremberg, I think it is high time to travel there, where we will meet with the mayor of Nuremberg, Markus König, who will give us his opening address. So please, Markus König, over to you.
Ja, einen wunderschönen guten Morgen an alle Teilnehmer und natürlich Glückwunsch an die Gewinner, die jetzt alles richtig auch getippt haben. Ja, liebe Teilnehmerinnen und Teilnehmer, ein herzliches Willkommen.
Stuff that you answered all these questions right. Welcome to this 9th edition of the Integrating City Conference here in Nuremberg on a digital.
Integrating cities.
Integrating City is the most important platform for a political dialogue about important integrational questions among experts and decision-making players at the European, but also at the community level, local level. The conference is organized in the project of the Values Project. It is not a coincidence that I am here, that it is taking place here in Nuremberg this time. Nuremberg has an immigration, an important figure of immigration, and it has a long history. And the integrational policy had an important role to play. So the city considered it as an important responsibility and task to give a sign of solidarity to immigrants without, of course, forgetting about its own interests. At the same time, it is an important target to avoid discrimination, to fight against racism. Now, the slogan of the city is the obligation to an active implementation of human rights, in particular when it comes to the historical responsibility which Nuremberg has. That's why human rights have become so important to us, and they are the basic priorities for us as a community, administration, but also the citizens. So what we are talking about people who may not have been in the city for a long time, who are not deeply rooted. But Nuremberg has a diversity of citizens, and it will be able to adapt to a better to all the challenges of an ever-increasingly globalized world. Fitting together is a central target, objective of the city of Nuremberg. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to be able to reach that target, we have elaborated some guidelines about the integrational policies. Now, these guidelines are about values and objectives which all the employees and the civil servants have to respect. Nuremberg is an ever-increasingly important process. It is not just a responsibility of the immigrants themselves. All citizens of the city have to participate and together work on this integration. And this also means that the city administration, the town hall, also has to take it into consideration. All the authorities and departments and enterprises have to look after it. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic had uncovered some weaknesses in our system, more than ever, it became clear that in such a situation as the COVID pandemic, cities play an important role when it comes to equal opportunities for all inhabitants, and in order to stress a successful integration of immigrants, and also in maintaining and looking after the diversity of population. But equal opportunities is something which is not a matter of course for everyone. And therefore, it is extremely important that the European communities support each other, the municipalities support each others, and that they do sign up to obligations. The Integrated Cities Council supports the city when it comes to an integrational society which is open to the immigration of foreigners. They support them by providing projects and by organizing exchanges and also best practices. Integrating cities has a charter, and Nuremberg has been a member of it since 2015, helps the cities to implement all the values and also to adapt actions to local conditions and to develop local actions specific for each city. Now, if we're talking about the way of integration of migrants, we have to talk about local solidarities, about the local, between the local authorities and the civil societies. We have to invest in it. And we have an incredibly committed voluntary sector, which in the terrible times of COVID has been so important and still is very important indeed. In order to be effective, we need strong and permanent partnerships between all participants, all players, the authorities, administration, civil society, enterprises, and the immigrants themselves. Now, the indispensable cooperation is in the midst of this year's Integrated Cities Conference here in Nuremberg. Civil society lives from the commitment of its of the citizen, and we have the opportunity to take up responsibilities by offering your support by voluntary work or financial support. Both are very important because they contribute in a manifold way to the quality, to the increased quality of life in Nuremberg. In many ways, where citizens commit themselves, they represent the lively activities in the city, in the social areas, in cultural areas, in sports, in ecology, or in other sectors. Nuremberg supports, together with local partners, the commitment of volunteers in a diverse manner. Some areas I want to mention. The Agency for Voluntary Work is the first contact partner for many people who settle down in Nuremberg, and many people want to do voluntary work. Colleagues give advice about voluntary activities in organizations of different kinds. Already, only in the indication education, we already have 2,000 people working on a voluntary contract. So we support this tremendously important work by networking, by counseling, and by making means and information available. The volunteers carry out valuable and sometimes difficult jobs in our society. It means that for them, the starting point for a civil commitment and corporate citizenship means further education. The events taking place, of course, will be carried out by people who work, people who have a paid job in cooperation with volunteers. So there's a array of different activities, consultations, which deal with all sorts of different questions and different activities. Now, the examples I've mentioned show very clearly, ladies and gentlemen, that migration and integration can be shaped and influenced in a positive manner if there is a strong and confident cooperation based on trust. Migration is a global phenomenon, but the integration, however, at local level is something which doesn't work out everywhere. But here we have the access to social services or health services, educational offers, or looking for apartments in the housing market, or social networking. And I think a tight and a good cooperation of all participants concerned is indispensable if we would like to overcome the crisis and if we want to become a more resistant society afterwards. It does not consist in making gaps between people. I'm sure that we are going to achieve this together, and we're going to get a better future united. So I hope that you are going to have a good event and that you're going to have a productive and constructive discussion, and I welcome you hopefully in the future personally here in Nuremberg, so we can have some of the 3 million bratwurst together. Thank you very much, and in this important time, please stay safe and healthy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Koenig, for these words. Indeed, I do hope you will leave some of us the opportunity to enjoy some of those bratwurst in the future. I'm sure we will be back. Thank you very much for those opening words. I would like now to hand over directly to Anna-Lisa Boni. She is the Secretary General of Eurocities, organizing this conference. So also please welcome Anna-Lisa.
Hello.
And over to you.
Thank you, Jean-Paul, and thank you, Marcus, for your inspiring introduction. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all fine and well warmed after this little quiz about Nuremberg and the Wurst. So from Eurocities, a huge welcome to this 9th Integrating Cities Conference. It's our 9th edition. Can you believe it? Incredible how time flies, but also it's incredible how altogether we've managed to keep such a strong commitment to this appointment. Also thanks to the support of the European Commission. We're here to look at, and meet every time to look at what cities do to become and be real integrating cities. So a warm, even if digital, welcome to all of you. So let me start by thanking the city of Nuremberg for hosting it. Thank you, Marcus. I was looking really forward to coming to your cities and eat wurst, but that's COVID. We have to live with it. So although we're meeting online at the end of an unusual, that's the minimum we can say, and challenging year, our program this year shows that, as I said before, cities remain dedicated to integration and building inclusive society. And I like the title particularly. It's very dear to me, this title, because of the conference, because it really wants to remind that, especially in these kind of times of crisis, local, but not only, local solidarity is and will continue to be at the basis of a resilient and sustainable future. So as we do for every edition, a new Integrating Cities report that I encourage you to read tonight before going to bed has been published just now. It gives a direct insight into how cities are integrating migrants, and it contains the evidence from the local level and the ground that is really key to inform an impactful European policy and decision making. Migration is a global phenomenon, but integration happens in cities. And so cities should therefore have a seat at the table when policies that impact the lives of migrants on the ground are designed. Last week, the European Commission published the Action Plan on Integration and Inclusion 2021-2027. That. It recognizes the key role of cities in the integration process, so very good. It provides a good basis for a continued cooperation between the different levels, local, national, and EU level, from many areas like education, training, employment skills, access to health, and adequate and affordable housing. This action plan could not have come at a more ideal point in time. Across Europe, the COVID pandemic has created, as Marcus said, unprecedented challenges for cities and their people. Migrants are among the groups that are the most affected by the pandemic. We've seen that. They're often the first to lose their jobs or their businesses. They face additional challenges when their education is disrupted or is put online, because it can really impact their long-term integration possibilities. And they may face additional barriers to access social services and support systems. So all of these will most certainly increase existing inequalities for migrants, people with a migrant background, refugees, and other vulnerable groups in cities. In the broader picture, we're still unlikely to measure the long-term impact of the crisis on our labor markets and the economy. I'm really, really worried about that. So we face many challenges, but at the same time, this year has also shown many examples of positivity and hope, with cities at the forefront of tackling the pandemic. At Eurocities, we've seen many, many interesting and extraordinary stories from cities going the extra mile to support their inhabitants. Some of these are also included in the report, so read it. They show that while responding to such immediate and very urgent challenges, cities do keep the bigger picture and work towards inclusive society. But let me highlight 3 points. First, the pandemic and the adaptation of integration services to an online reality are a real key challenge for cities, especially in terms of resources. It is good, therefore, that the action plan on integration and inclusion recognizes that cities may lack sufficient resources or that they may have difficulties in accessing EU funds. So it is welcome because also it encourages an increased involvement of cities in the preparation, implementation, and revision of the relevant national programs, under the shared management, so shared by both Commission and the member states. So that is good. But this said, we need to go a step further, and we keep on saying it. It's a long time we've been saying that. Cities need direct access to EU funding, support their integration strategies, policies, and plans. And for instance, I'd like to mention the initiatives such as the Urban Innovative Actions from the Commission DG Regional Policy. They are a very good example of how things can be done, and they should be expanded. That model should be expanded with a focus on integration measures. So talking about EU resources, it is really urgent that some EU member states end their veto, please, on the new budget and recovery funds, because they need to be adopted. And as our president, the mayor of Florence, just elected, said, this is time for solidarity, not for vetoes. As you know, there are a couple of countries that are blocking that. But anyway, talking about solidarity and the importance of solidarity in migration and asylum matters, that's my second point. As we've seen throughout this challenging year, cities are ready to put solidarity into practice, words into action. Many of our cities have been outspoken about the bad living conditions for refugees on the Greek islands. You remember the camps, and also the burning down of the Moria camp, and now with the winter coming, it's hard. So in the context of our Solidarity Initiative, Solidarity Cities initiatives and beyond, many cities have really shown their readiness to take in refugees from the camps and stand in solidarity with refugees, but also between and each other. Unfortunately, we don't see that, a similar sense of solidarity at the level of national governments, not enough. So now in September, the Commission published the new Pact of Migration and Asylum. Let's hope that this can be a starting point for discussions and agreement on a shared framework for migration and asylum across the EU. So the third and final point, and I'm done, I want to put on the table today is the continuing and worrying narrative around migration. I remember we had this point a lot on the agenda in our previous edition. It's it's really this narrative around migration and diversity that also results in a strong polarization of our societies. Again, Migrants and those with a migrant background are the most vulnerable to xenophobia, hate speech, hate crimes. There's a survey that has been published recently by the EU Fundamental Rights Agency that has found that minorities face increasing rates of discrimination, harassment, marginalization. Now, at the same time, our societies are becoming more open about leading difficult conversations about discrimination, racism, and so on. And we've seen, the Black Lives Matter movement taking hold in Europe this year. So in our Integrating Cities report, we described how this development also changed our institution and administrations, whether long-standing or more recently. A lot of cities are showing responsible and collective leadership. I was talking about this and the incredible work Bristol is doing a few days ago in a webinar, and implementing plans and strategies to actively fight discrimination and racism. Also making their administrations more diverse and representative of the citizens they work. And because such initiatives will continue to be crucial going forward and should receive adequate support. So let me conclude on this positive note. It's true we may face many challenges because yes, cities are the place where so many challenges of all kinds concentrate. But there is one thing that I believe that all of you here have experienced and are experiencing as a positive measure to tackle them or to contribute to tackle them. It is this continuing and continued cooperation, joint work, this going beyond and across borders. It is looking for shared solution, believing in solidarity, as I said, believing in solidarity and equality as a fundamental set of values for public action. So collective, intelligent, responsible, cooperation, leadership, solidarity are for me the way forward. So thank you, Nuremberg. Thank you to all the participants. Thank you to the European Commission for supporting us. A special thank you to my team, with Ferrouz and Rosella leading on the organization. Thank you to Jean-Paul, to the translators, everyone. And I look forward to plenty of cooperation and solidarity and ideas during the next 2 days and beyond. Have a good next
proceeding.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annalisa, for these opening words as well. It's really great to see all the willingness to partner up inside Eurocities. It's common across many action areas, but in particular this one, and with the topic today around volunteering of particular importance. So thanks a lot for these opening words. Now we have with us on video, but still with us, and it's important, the European Commissioner for Home Affairs, Ylva Johansson, and she will give us also her perspective, especially with the presentation of the new European Commission's action plan. So please, Ylva.
Good morning. I'm very happy you're holding this conference on integration. Your timing could not be better. Last week, I presented the Commission's new action plan on integration and inclusion. Everyone who has the right to be in Europe should be able to build a life in Europe, should be welcome. And you hold the key, because all integration is local. People don't integrate into a nation. They integrate into a community. Migrants mostly live in cities. 13% of Europe's city population was born outside the EU. In the countryside, it's only 3%. You are the ones who make integration happen in cities all over Europe. You are the ones who deliver essential services to newcomers: education, health, housing. You are the ones who help migrants find jobs by putting them in touch with employers, by informing them how they can set up their own business. And you are responsible for sports and culture, which are so important for integration. People make a living doing their job, but they make friends at a football club. Integration may be local, but the challenges are continental. I want to support your efforts in any way I can. Our action plan focuses on 4 cornerstones of integration and inclusion. First, education, essential to learn the language, gain knowledge, and get skills to find a good job. The Commission will support teachers to teach diverse and inclusive classrooms, support migrants to learn the language, and help with the recognition of qualifications, because many migrants are already highly skilled. Second, employment. We need to close the employment gap between natives and migrants. To do this, I'm working with economic and social partners in the European Partnership on Integration. We will support initiatives that help employers assess skills, initiatives that support migrants to set up their own business, through mentoring and the European investment program InvestEU. The third cornerstone of integration is healthcare. The Commission will promote access to healthcare for migrants. That includes mental health care and the specific health needs of women, childbirth, becoming a mother. And fourth, housing. The Commission will work with Member States to promote access to adequate and affordable social housing, to fight discrimination and segregation in the housing market, and to promote an autonomous housing for asylum applicants, especially for families. So what can I do? What can the European Commission do to support you? First, promoting cooperation and sharing experiences. Our action plan offers a solid framework for exchanging best practices. I hope also today you will be able to share many success stories. Our EU funds are one of the most important tools we have to foster integration. I encourage you to use these funds. Last month, I sent a letter to all EU and Member States, together with my colleagues, Commissioner for Cohesion and Reforms, Elisa Ferreira, and Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights, Nicolas Schmit. We asked Member States to prioritize integration and inclusion when using EU funds, involve local and regional authorities in the programming of the funds. I intend to make it easier for you to find out what's available and how to apply for funds. Our action plan is only the beginning. Now the real work starts. To make integration and inclusion a success, 3 things will be essential. First, support for migrant women. When women do well, their children also do well. Unfortunately, migrant women are less likely to work or follow education. That means addressing the specific obstacles women face. For example, when setting up language courses, make sure there are childcare facilities. Second, fighting racism. Too many people equate being European with being white. Our EU Anti-Racism Action Plan is essential for integration and inclusion. And third, to build an inclusive Europe, we need the cities of Europe. We need you. I want to build strong partnerships with cities by expanding the Urban Academy on Integration, transforming it into a comprehensive program to train policymakers on all levels of government, by continuing to work with Eurocities, a platform representing the largest cities in Europe. Your contribution will be essential. And I want to foster relationships between cities where many migrants live. So let's start today. This conference is an excellent opportunity to boost old relationships and build new ones. I wish you a very successful conference.
So some very positive, encouraging, optimistic words there from the Commissioner. And now we move to the national perspective, and often in these conferences it's not always easy to get the perspective of national governments. And we are lucky enough and honoured enough to have the presence of Mrs. Annette Widmann-Maus. She is Minister of State for Migration, Refugees and Integration of the Federal Republic of Germany.
Mayor König, Commissioner Johansson, Ms. Boney, mayors from all across Europe. We are living in turbulent times. The COVID-19 pandemic is a challenge for Europe and the world. This is why we cannot meet today in Nuremberg, and that is why I am sending you my warmest greetings by video and sharing with you my thoughts on integration policy from the Federal Chancellery here in Berlin. First of all, I would like to thank you, the city of Nuremberg and Eurocities, for hosting this event. It is important. After all, it is particularly important right now to continue dialogue and strengthen our networks. So it is wonderful that you are able to welcome new members to integrating cities. This is a strong signal. It shows that from Riga to Lisbon, from Oslo to Rome, together we are driving integration and participation forward in Europe. For everyone, no matter where they come from. In Europe, cities are the beating hearts of integration. It is here that people of the most diverse backgrounds are living, working, and learning together. Here, integration is happening on a scale of millions. But here, too, there can of course be conflict between immigrants and locals. Then the new meets familiar. We need to resolve these conflicts peacefully, respectfully, and always based on the foundation of European fundamental rights and values. Yes, this can be arduous and time-consuming. It poses a challenge to neighborhoods and cities. But you and integrating cities are meeting this challenge head-on. This deserves our respect and recognition. I would like to thank you for that. I would also like to thank the European Commission, who, with its new action plan on integration and inclusion, has clearly emphasized the role of cities and pledged to lend them further support. Yes, cities are the beating hearts of integration. Voluntary work is an important pace setter which lets this heart beat loudly and strongly. In Germany, we saw this for ourselves at the time of the high numbers of refugees in 2015, and the trend continues to this day. Without the tens of thousands of volunteers and their wonderful assistance, we would hardly have been able to deal with the arrival and initial integration of many refugees. We must continue to strengthen and protect this engagement today. After all, it builds consensus and understanding. That is why the state must, alongside its social benefits, also provide the framework to enable the volunteer sector to harness its full potential, to enable it to be as diverse as our societies. In Germany, therefore, we want to work to ensure more women and men with a migrant background engage in voluntary work and involve migrant organizations to a greater extent. That is what guides the German National Action Plan on Integration. In it, we tackle integration strategically and systematically, whether the workplace, in German classes, or in the voluntary sector. Through the action plan, I coordinate 300 actors, needless to say towns and municipalities, as well as 75 migrant organizations are also on board. After all, we want to tap our country's integration expertise in its entirety, and the experience of immigrants is part of this expertise. I was pleased to see that the European Commission has also set up a group of experts to focus on the prospects of people with a migrant background. This is the right approach. What is more, we need to be even bolder here. It finally needs to be normal for all people, including those with a migrant background, to have the same opportunities in all spheres. On the labor market, then applying for a vocational training, or when looking for an apartment. We need to open our structures and fight discrimination. And let me add, we need everyone on board. Making demands and providing support, this two-pronged approach is what integration is all about. I am delighted that integrating cities is a pioneer and a role model here. I hope the event is a success, and I'm sure that your network will continue to grow and increase the heartbeat of integration. Keep up the good work, and please stay healthy.
Thank you, Keep up the good work. This is what we need to do, and we will now go straight into this work. And I will like to introduce our panel for today, which is in fact very representative of the integrating cities process, with two representatives from the European level. I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Johannes Luchner, who is the European Commission's Deputy Director General in the Directorate General Migration and Home Affairs. Johannes, welcome. And Mr. Damien Carême, who is a member of the European Parliament, and he will be expressing himself in French. Welcome, Damien, and thanks for being with us. And on the local side, we have Mrs. Asher Craig, who is Deputy Mayor of Bristol, in charge of communities, equalities, and public health. And we have Elizabeth Ries, who is Councillor for Social Affairs in Nuremberg. So welcome to the four of you, and thank you very much for taking the time for being with us. I would like to maybe start feeding on straight away from the European Commissioner's address and go to Johannes. Could you tell us a little bit more about some of the details inside the action plan presented by the Commissioner, and maybe particularly looking at the role of cities in this respect, in helping you achieve your ambitions for integration and inclusion?
Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. Can you see me? I had an issue with my camera.
We can see you perfectly.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks to you, thanks to Mrs. Boney, and thanks to your team for organizing that. You know that the Commission is often described as a rather distant administration. And on the issue of migration, it is, of course, very, very important to cut that distance and go local, because as the Commissioner said in her statement, integration happens at local level. So for us, we have expressed in the newly adopted action plan that integration is a societal process, and integration is the responsibility of a multitude of stakeholders, of migrants themselves, of course, but also the host communities, public authorities, institutions, and in particular cities, but also the people living in cities, the civil societies, organizations that are active, churches, religious communities, as well as the private sector. And it is a fact that, of course, most migrants live in cities, look for cities, because that's where the opportunities are greatest for them. The other thing we are very proactively doing, also in the framework of the action plan, is to make sure that we actually know our clientele. In other words, we want to talk to cities, we want to talk to regional actors, but we also want to talk to migrants. So we have, for instance, recently set up a group of migrants that we can consult when it comes also to policy making, and in particular when it comes to integration. We can build on very successful examples of cooperation, such as the partnership on the inclusion of migrants and refugees under the urban agenda for the EU. Now, on the action plan, very concretely, it includes 13 different proposals on how these various stakeholders that I managed can increase their cooperation. We will launch a partnership with the Committee of the Regions to start a structured political dialogue and to promote an exchange of learning of best practices, of experiences between regions, regional authorities and local authorities. We also would like to expand the Urban Academy on Integration into a larger, more comprehensive capacity building program for policy makers and practitioners, again, from the local, regional and national levels. We will support cities also in preventing radicalization by providing funding, by providing guidance and training to practitioners and local actors, including under the Radicalization Awareness Network and other initiatives. Most importantly, we will help build and strengthen the capacity of local and regional authorities to involve local communities in the design and implementation of integration measures and programs. And last but not least, I also would like to address the question of funding and volunteering. We will finance projects to promote volunteering actions in an inclusive approach, and those are not just words. What we would like to see is that these actions are co-designed by migrants and host communities together. And there I return to the beginning that in everything we do under the action plan, we want to make sure that the various stakeholders are brought together and work together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Johannes. And indeed, we can discuss a little bit how we can better achieve this level of cooperation between stakeholders. But first, maybe could I go to Damien for a quick reaction on the action plan, and also maybe bringing in some of your experience prior to being a member of the European Parliament. I understand you had a long time serving in a town in France, and having been particularly hit by the wave of migrants in 2015, 2016. So please, a reaction to the European Commission's action plan.
Oui, merci de votre invitation.
Thank you for inviting me today here.
Effectivement, je suis eurodéputé
yes,
depuis
indeed,
un an, mais avant cela,
I've been in the European Parliament for a year, but I've worked in France for 17 years, and I've dealt with migration because in my city in France, between 2015 and 2019, we've hosted many refugees. In 2015, many refugees arrived, and we didn't have the means to host them. And in 2020, the situation really hasn't changed for the populations that arrived on the border leading to Great Britain. So I'm talking with my role as a local mayor and as my function of parliamentarian today. So as a mayor, it was really hard to deal with that situation. There were a lot of unemployed, a lot of poor people in my city.
Ces personnes, ces chercheurs de refuge, comme je les appelle, qui arrivaient
those
sur le territoire
asylum seekers coming into my town were part also of the problem because we needed to integrate them as good as they could.
De la migration entretenue,
and the whole,
aussi bien, et je l'affirme aujourd'hui, par l'Europe,
the whole
par les gouvernements locaux,
speech on migration supported by the European Commission, but also the local government, is really hard to deal with because we think of migration as a problem. We only talk about keeping migrants out of our borders. So it is really hard for a mayor to work on integrating those migrants in a collectivity with those speeches taken up by the media as well. So mayors are pragmatic people and can see all the difficulties that has to be taken up on a local level. When I was a mayor, I really tried to work alongside with the European Commission. We tried to build a refugee camp with the help of the High Commissioner of the Human Rights. And as a mayor, I didn't have another solution, but I couldn't leave those people without access to water, without access to housing, healthcare, etc. So I've worked alongside the civil society, and I also asked the European institution for help and for financing, but I didn't get any positive response.
Sur mon territoire. Et je n'ai de cesse aujourd'hui que je suis au Parlement européen.
And now that I'm in the European Parliament, I keep on saying that we need to work in cooperation with the local authorities because they are the best to integrate migrants in societies in all the member states across Europe. We have to build on these experiences. It is important. In Europe, I've been working on the implementation of the Dublin Reglement, so it's really important for me too. The action plan has been presented last week, I think, for integrating migrant people. For me, cities and communities help us to integrate migrants because local authorities are the last level of authority that still have the trust of their citizens. We are the one who can help integrate migrants. It's not always easy because the context is complex. And when you have to face all those difficult situations, integrating the migrant population is another challenge.
Juste un mot pour terminer ce
I just want to conclude on the idea that I've created a network in French for cities and neighborhoods who integrate migrants. So we have several cities and regions that say that they are ready to host migrants, but they also said that the states and Europe need to play their role. We are ready to implement all these measures on the territory. In order not to make differences between migrants and the rest of the society, we talk about unconditional hosting of migrants, meaning that no migrant should be sleeping on the streets, but no French people or other citizens should be sleeping on the streets either. So we need to work towards that direction. We need to support integrating these migrants and the whole society. So it is important for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. I mean, it obviously sounds like you understand very well what happens on the ground. We're talking about integration and inclusion, but you're also pointing out to the fact that cities have to deal with humanitarian assistance in reality, and that has a level of urgency and emergency that is again a lot different. And it sounds like cities have a partner in the European Parliament to defend their role. I would like then now to go to the other side of the channel, to Bristol, to Asha. Maybe just a quick reaction of what you heard already from Johannes and from Damien, and also some thoughts on how you would see this facilitated, integrated approach between stakeholders in the city.
Thank you. So in Bristol, and you're absolutely right, cities is where it's at. You know, we know our citizens, and we are the interface, obviously, between our refugee and migrant communities in the city. So locally, we've developed some really strong frameworks in Bristol to ensure good cooperation between our partners. We have something called the One City approach, which is a way of engaging all of our partner agencies. And it's a recognition that as a city council, we can provide a core infrastructure to allow partners to work together, but we know we can't do it alone. In all of this, we also need to ensure that our migrant and community voices are heard, and we can use our mayor, Marvin Rees's voice, as a representative of the city to inspire all of our stakeholders to be part of a wider movement. On a national level, I think we need to collaborate with main cities in the UK, and we are already doing that in terms of a number of other projects that we are engaged in. We have an inclusive cities project and an integration every day, a program that brings together over 12 cities in the UK working together on how we can learn best practice from each other in terms of how we can better integrate migrant and refugee communities within our cities. We also need to make sure that we're amplifying the voices of those affected so that national policy reflects this. So, for example, Bristol has called for appropriate accommodation, irrespective of people's immigration status, and evidence regarding the impact of COVID-19 on those with no recourse to public funds. At the European and international level, we also need to ensure that cities are well represented. Platforms such as the Mayor's Dialogue on Human Mobility, the Mayor's Migration Council, and of course the Integrating Cities Charter have an important role to play, and individual cities have much to contribute, but need to ensure that we are working in partnership with those that are affected and also with key stakeholders such as NGOs. We can also solve problems such as pandemics, climate change, and inequality working together. We need to maintain our involvement and collaboration at European level, and this is particularly important for us here in the UK in the context of Brexit. And at the recent annual conference, our mayor underlined the commitment of Bristol and fellow UK cities to continued collaboration with counterparts within Eurocities. So we need to partner with other cities to solve a common problem and to lend our voice to these issues.
Thanks, thanks, Asha. And now over to Nuremberg. You have a lot of different migrant communities in Nuremberg. Can you share also some of your experiences in terms of multi-stakeholder partnership, volunteering, and how cities are facilitating that, and your example in Nuremberg?
Hello, Europe. Hello, all of you. Yes, I would very much like to share some of our experiences from Nuremberg. I'm not happy that you couldn't come to see us here in Nuremberg, but we all hope to meet you next year or in better times. As to migration and integration from the perspective of Nuremberg, you asked about the situation in our city, and I would just like to emphasize that migration is a very, very broad phenomenon. We have about 50% of our population with migrant background, whatever that means. So we are a very diverse city. We have citizens whose parents or grandparents came, but who are Nuremberg citizens like myself and all of the other people in the city. So this is what we saw when refugees came to Nuremberg, that we had the strength that very many people from this diverse society spoke the languages, knew what problems might arise when people from Syria, from Africa, from other countries came to Nuremberg. So we saw that the citizenship is in itself diverse, and so this is a strength to those who came recently, because they could find people who had experienced things like they did themselves. And so we all together as Nurembergans from how many generations in Germany, that did not matter, but to see that the host society in itself was very diverse, and so it was easier for people coming in to feel welcome and to find their place in our city. And this is what is important for our approach to integration and diversity. that we can't say there are Nurembergans and migrants, because we are diverse in ourselves. And this is a very important thing for all of us, for the administration, for politics, but also for every citizen, and for the engagement policies in which means volunteering and so on, that we have very, very different people who have strengths from different resources, and who can work together to be solidary, to live a solidarity city. So we do not focus only on people having arrived recently, but we see Nuremberg citizens as a very, like a process, because cities have always been the places where people come and leave, and where there are transitions and transformations. And this is what makes cities very strong. So what does that mean on an international or on a multi-governance level? Sorry, I don't speak English very often. That means that we have to see what we can do on ourselves, but especially we have to see what we can learn from others. This is the focus on exchanging experiences with other cities, having city networks, having twin cities, having exchanges all over Europe and beyond, to see where are our differences and where we can learn from each other, but also the wish to other levels, like the EU level, but also the national and the federal states in Germany. So to see what they can give us, and to tell them what the challenges are from our perspective. And Monsieur Carême, you said it's like a pragmatic approach, but we need to ask for support from what the other levels can give us. And our task is, in the networks we can form, to emphasize what is it we need, what we need, and where we need support, and to ask our questions to where they can maybe be solved. So the word would be dialogue and solidarity beyond our level and beyond our borders.
And you mentioned, diversity, and we can only celebrate that. I think if we establish that cities are a key player, then certainly they can play their role in channeling funds to the right places on the ground locally. But if I go back to the Commission, because we've already talked about different types, I think, of people in the end. We hear from Damien with some of the humanitarian type crisis that we see facing, asylum seekers, refugees, people having traumatic experiences. And then we're also talking about integration and inclusion with other types of migrant profiles, people coming to seek maybe economic opportunities in Europe. How does your action plan cover these different types of people, of statuses? Does it address all of them? And how do you see the partnership and the stakeholder approach for each type of category, which has its own real difficulties, in terms of citizenship, in terms of rights, in terms of access to the labor market, etc., etc.?
Well, if you allow me, I would also like to react to two issues that came through here already. One, the issue raised by MEP Carême when he said that Europe was nowhere to be seen. It remains a fact that the European Union is organized on the basis of the nation state. And we are trying with these kinds of initiatives, but also partially with financing, to cut through this. But of course, institutionally, we don't react directly, if you will, to a particular challenge a particular community or city faces. And it's not because we don't want to, it's simply because we don't have the setup and the means to do it. The second issue that Mr. Carême mentioned, I'm grateful for this dialogue and for your work, because what you do hopefully will stick also in the minds and heads of people. We have now a public discourse that in many instances overvalues protecting the borders, fighting illegal migration, and so on. These things need to be done. But we speak, I think, too little about the great contribution migrants make, about the, even at technical level, short and medium term, positive fiscal impact migrants can have if we integrate them fast and with the right measures, of the competitive advantage diversity can bring. And we now have this very good example of the vaccine development by BioNTech, by Turkish immigrants to Germany. That I think is a very, very important task that you have at local level, and that you can do with much more, I would say, power of convictions than we can do in Brussels. Now, to your question, what we would like to see is that the European financing, to be very concrete, under the Asylum and Migration Fund, can help directly local communities, can help directly local authorities to promote the knowledge transfer that Mrs. Rees also mentioned, the best practices in all areas of integration. That includes also to set up one-stop shop structures for the integration in local integration centers. And then it covers the subjects in particular that the Commissioner mentioned, education and training. And I think the language education here is absolute key for integration. Housing, access to basic services, including health. We have rather disturbing statistics as to what happens to the health status of migrants now during the COVID crisis, which is negatively ironic in the sense that our health systems depend on migrants. 13% of our key workers are migrants. And even governments who are generally, I would say, rather skeptical when it comes to migration, during the COVID crisis, organized special trains, special flights for migrants in order to help out in the healthcare systems. And I think it's also these stories that we need to use when we communicate that migrants are not a burden per se. Migrants can be, if used correctly, a great benefit to all of us. Then the integration in the labor market. And here, I'm always jealous when I talk to my Canadian counterparts, because what they do is they organize migration in such a way that people come into the Canadian labor market and they start working. And everything is being done at national level to facilitate that, even before these migrants enter Canada. And the economic effect and the integration effect, of course, is therefore much more rapid and more positive. And then we also want to, of course, favor exchanges between migrants and the host society. Now, how we address that to different constituencies is difficult, because our member states have very, very different organizations. I'm Austrian, for instance, and Austria just decided that everything, including the legal advice to migrants, should now be done by a state agency rather than civil society. In other countries, of course, we have entirely different structures, so we have to adapt as we go along. Just sorry, I'm a bit long here, but I'm not in the fortunate position to have this kind of positive debate very, very often. We are also very conscious that on the financing, and I'm not talking about emergency financing, I'm talking about capacity building financing, we have to try and go directly to the local level, and therefore we are publishing calls. We have published calls that allow applications, and there is one still going on for 33 million euros that can still be accessed, and I'm happy to let you have more detailed information on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to be clear, when you say migrants working in the healthcare sector, we're talking about non-EU citizens, right?
We're talking about, I think if you look at it, we're talking about both.
Okay.
I have seen examples of Romanians, Bulgarians, but I've also seen examples, for instance, of Ukrainians who during that crisis, during the COVID crisis, indeed got a special regime to be able to enter specific member states.
Okay. Okay, maybe a reaction from Damien then on these issues, and also maybe a focus with the labour market. I would be interested to hear your views on the relative possibilities there.
So there is no specific reaction. I think that the director general said very interesting things. So there are very good examples of integration from migrants in societies. They are full of those examples in Europe, in every country in Europe. And this reality is good. It should be part of speeches, of discourses, of narratives. And I want to highlight this because I said this in a public meeting last week to Commissioner Johansson.
Il faut qu'on parle différemment d'immigration. Les villes ne pourront, avec toute la meilleure volonté du monde, tous les moyens financiers, logistiques du monde, essayer de faire de l'intégration de ces personnes. Si on n'a pas un autre discours sur la migration européen que celui d'une Europe forteresse, d'une Europe où j'entends protéger les frontières, lutter contre la migration illégale, qui est quand même le discours extrêmement dominant quand on parle de migration en Europe. Les villes pourront faire ce qu'elles veulent, elles n'y arriveront pas parce que c'est ce que ressentent les populations quand elles voient un migrant, elles se demandent s'il est en situation légale, comment il est rentré, etc. Et ça, je voudrais simplement que les membres de la Commission soient convaincus, ça rend le travail des collectivités locales extrêmement compliqué dans le travail avec les populations. Et je l'ai dit, je reproche au commissaire qui a présenté le plan asile-migration il y a quelques semaines maintenant, quand il parle de shopping migratoire.
And when at the EU we talk about migration shopping, for me it is a very extremist narrative. It is, we could not talk this way, because then at local level the people they will have difficulties changing this narrative. So we need to put everything in context. We just adopted yesterday at the European Parliament an assessing report on Dublin. Everyone except the far right acknowledges that Dublin is catastrophic. It is catastrophic.
Il faut en parler et dedans j'ai demandé d'intégrer ce que représentait la migration sur l'ensemble de la population européenne, sur les 480 millions de population européenne. Et en fait, c'est pas grand-chose en termes de personnes, en fait, c'est quelques millions sur 480 millions, ça représente une partie infime. D'ailleurs, j'étais très content parce que l'extrême droite a dit non, on n'est pas d'accord pour faire figurer ces chiffres parce que ça minimise le problème. Non, ça minimise pas le problème, ça montre le problème dans sa réalité. Et il ne faut pas maximiser le problème en balançant des chiffres comme en France. Je particulièrement bien quand j'entends dire on a eu l'année dernière 130 000 demandes d'asile en France. Mais 130 000 sur 67 millions d'habitants, c'est moins qu'à Malte, c'est moins qu'en Grèce, c'est moins qu'en Italie, c'est moins qu'ailleurs. Ça nous place en 6e ou 7e position. Donc il faut arrêter de faire peur en lançant des chiffres comme ça aux populations. Il faut construire. L'intégration, elle ne se décrète pas simplement par des moyens qu'on met en œuvre, elle se construit aussi dans les schémas de pensée, dans la rhétorique et dans les discours que l'on tient, politiques, de responsables politiques, au niveau européen, au niveau des États membres et au niveau local. Moi, je pense que c'est extrêmement important. Voilà ce que ça appelle Cette discussion est importante, hein. Elle est extrêmement intéressante, riche, et toutes les villes que je peux rencontrer, malheureusement, rencontrent ce problème-là et me parlent de ce problème-là. Et je pense que c'est partagé par beaucoup. Et là aussi, il faut qu'on échange et qu'on apprenne à échanger autour de ça et qu'on positive beaucoup plus le discours sur les migrations. Quand j'entends parler de flux migratoires, voilà, et surtout de prendre le problème, je ne vais pas parler comme ça de problème migratoire, de prendre le fait migratoire comme quelque chose non plus de conjoncturel mais de structurel. Et une fois qu'on aura posé comme ça le problème, on le verra différemment. C'est comment aujourd'hui, la question c'est comment on peut faire avec l'immigration, et sans être pour ou contre l'immigration, c'est pas le sujet, mais comment on peut faire avec ces migrations, parce que de toute manière, on doit apprendre à vivre avec ces migrations et comment on les inclut dans la société tous les jours, dans le quotidien de tous nos habitants européens.
I hear what you say. I would also like to give you one more question on how do you think then cities can help shape this narrative that you are calling for, especially as I would assume that cities will be facing with their own sets of challenges locally, trying to convince their own local population that maybe, you know, immigration is not such a threat for them, for their employment, for their access to the labor market. So do you see also the tensions at the level of the cities that might prevent cities from taking a strong position in this debate? And how would you encourage them to do so?
Mais il faut expliquer, et ce que je disais tout à l'heure, moi dans ma ville, où encore une fois, 2500 chercheurs de refuge qui arrivent pour 24 000 habitants, vous voyez, c'est extrêmement important en proportion. Et j'ai expliqué à la population, je faisais des courriers régulièrement à la population, j'avais des rencontres, et surtout on a permis les rencontres entre les personnes accueillantes et les personnes accueillies sur la ville, en matière de sport, en matière de culture, en matière d'école, puisque les enfants du camp qu'on avait mis étaient scolarisés dans les écoles. Et quand on permet la rencontre humaine, eh ben, tous les tabous, tous les fantasmes tombent. Et le préfet, le représentant de l'État dans ma région me disait « Mais monsieur le maire, c'est complètement suicidaire ce que vous faites, vous allez voir l'extrême droite aux prochaines élections va remporter la ville facilement. »
Mr. Mayor, what you are doing is crazy. You will see the far right will be elected for the next elections. But it wasn't the case because they couldn't even have a list on the election list. So when you look at humanity, there are a lot of examples which actually promote integration. Today, a lot of media, a lot of narrative use a negative image of immigration. But personally, I really believe in showing the example, in leading by the example. So for me, the important thing here is to actually lead by a positive example. The more local authorities talk positively about migration, the more integration will be easy. So I think it's all benefits for everyone.
Thank you for that, Damien. Maybe a reaction from Elizabeth, and then I will go to Asha. Elizabeth first.
Yes, I would like really to emphasize what you said and try to give an perspective from our city. It is important to choose our words as politicians, but also as representatives of the administration. And it is important not to try to avoid envy. If there are problems, if there are things you can't solve, it is sometimes maybe easy to say, well, I would give you this or that if there weren't so many migrants. This is one way. This is not a solution, but this is a kind of alibi. And it might be the easy way, but this is what causes envy and jealousy and problems. So it is always important to try to find solutions for special situations and circumstances who do not give other groups in the population the impression that they something is taken from them to give it to somebody else. This is another example from the time when many refugees came. We tried very hard not to close schools and sports facilities, to have these facilities for newcomers in the first situation, but to find other buildings who were not taken from somebody else. Because, you know, parents whose children can't go to school because there are refugees placed by the authorities in their school, they say, well, why can't my children go to school? Why don't they solve this problem differently? So you have to try to choose your words, but you also have to try to find solutions who do not cause envy or jealousy or blaming on others. This is sometimes more difficult, and I know that this depends also on the financial means you have. So it is not always easy to go this way, but we tried always to find ways not to take things or to give the impression that things are taken from one group and given to another. This is what you can do in organizing things locally. And yeah, the other thing you said is, I really want to emphasize, you are responsible on how you choose your words.
I think that this issue of words is very important, and even just the way that we use indiscriminately, refugee, migrant, immigrant, asylum seeker. There is so much confusion in this area, and words are power.
We're not afraid of making it quite clear about the kind of city that we want to be. We've set that out quite clearly. Obviously, we will be signing the charter, but we introduced an equality charter into the city about 2 years ago. I think we have about over 200-300 signatories, organizations, faith groups, businesses, public sector, who have all signed that document to say, this is the kind of city that we want to be, and inclusive, and this is how we expect to behave as organizations and companies and faith organizations. I think one of the issues that we have is we're trying constantly as a city to portray positive messages, positive images. We also need to remind our cities as well that we are made up of immigrants from way back when. Many of the people who are Bristolian weren't originally from Bristol. And so, interestingly enough, in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement, and when the statue was pulled down, the mayor stood up something called the History Commission, because I think he felt that it was important not just to look at the lives of Black people who came to the city, but actually all citizens, women, poor people, the Irish. We need to understand who we are and where we come from to really kind of embrace, our differences. So narrative, dialogue, but one of the issues is, the media. A couple of years ago in the city of Birmingham, I attended a conference around migration and integration and refugee communities, and I was really moved by the editor of what was the biggest newspaper in the city. He stood up and gave a speech, and he said that he no longer their policy is to no longer denigrate and refugee and migrant communities. So he made a conscious decision that his newspaper, which is read by over a million people in Birmingham, in that city, to spin the message positively, talk about the positive attributes that migrant and refugee communities, in an attempt to try and change their mindset. Obviously, that's only at local level. It will get drowned out by the national media and the discourse that they try to sow. But the example has to come from national government. You're absolutely right. Instead of kind of vilifying migrant and refugee communities. We need to be talking about what the positive attributes that they bring to our cities. So, dialogue, communication, but there has to be a commitment at all levels, and we will continue to struggle with those messages, particularly when people are listening to different messages at different levels. We should all be become quite harmonized in that. But we will continue to do what we can in our city to encourage and embrace our differences, because we are a city. People need to recognize we are a city that speaks 92 languages. We have 187 different countries of birth, over 45 different religions and faiths are within our city. We are already a melting pot of diversity, and we've already begun to embrace that. And the point that was made about making sure that we have the right narrative, because obviously even through COVID, we couldn't leave anybody on the street. No one questioned who, with the homeless, and we have a few migrants who are homeless. We didn't look at people's status. We just acted and did what we needed to do. And as a result of that, we're now going to go on to look at ways in which we can continue to support those directly impacted by COVID. So.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important to highlight this issue of the words, and I think that there is an indiscriminate use of the words refugees, asylum seekers, migrants, immigrants. It's sometimes very confusing, and words is power, as they say, and so every word is definitely important. I would also like to reflect a little bit on the feedback that you're getting from the ground. At the moment, given the current situation. We know that some sectors have been hit particularly hard by the lockdown crisis, and those sectors are sectors that would tend to employ maybe more so people with immigrant backgrounds. I would like to get a little bit of a feedback on that from the ground. Maybe for Damien first.
Oui, on sait que c'est pas seulement les populations migrantes.
Yes, we know that it's not only migrant population that have been hit the hardest, but the poorest populations, including migrants who have suffered a lot and who suffer today from the sanitary crisis. They were the ones hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic because they are the ones doing the most needed job. For example, cashiers, healthcare workers, etc. So it's a real difficulty here, and I think that integrating migrants is important in terms of capacity building, because I think that high-skilled migrants are easier to integrate in societies than less skilled migrants. So we should really have a program to fight poverty, at least in cities, in order to not make a difference between migrant populations and local poor populations. In the European Parliament, because we all divided in committees, it's sometimes really hard to work on poverty and on migrant integration together, but I think that we should do so. I think we should collaborate. And I think we should really involve member states, because all member states have various policies. In cities, we really rely on civil society organizations, and in France, for example, when we have cases against people helping migrants, it's really hard, and it doesn't help integration. So when you go to the European Justice Court, well, obviously states lose most of the time, but I think it's a pity that we do not take into account a segment of the population when fighting poverty, for example.
Sociales, notamment autonomes. Mais peut-être des incitations européennes.
Maybe we should encourage member states to really fight poverty.
Johannes, you mentioned this. I think it's an advisory group, right? With some migrants that are there. Are you also using this group to get feedback? How does that operate, and how is that part of your multi-stakeholder approach? And particularly, maybe what kind of feedback are you getting from the current situation and its impacts on these populations?
We just started that, and the intention is to use these migrants as a sounding board. And I hope you don't think I contradict myself, but of course, also when it comes to the way they came to Europe, because I spend most of my time not on integration, but on trying to fight smuggling networks, trying to make sure that people don't spend the last money of their village in order to then, die in the Atlantic right now or in the Mediterranean. So it is a search for feedback for the reality of refugees, genuine refugees, where the reality is that most of them never had any intention to come to Europe. I worked with Syrians for a long time, also in the field. Nobody wanted to leave Syria, and then they didn't want to leave Lebanon, and then they were basically, circumstances forced them to. So to take into account these different realities, and then you have, of course, economic migrants, and that is going to get worse with COVID, and we see it now on the Western Atlantic route. So to also find out, when we say we're going to fight the root causes of irregular migration, I think it's worthwhile, but then we need to talk to the migrants and see under what circumstances they would either choose a legal route to Europe or choose to stay. And there again, I think we need to be humble in our discourse. We alone will not eradicate the root causes of migration, and worse, of people fleeing, actually escaping, leaving, although they did not want to leave. So for us, having a group of migrants who are well integrated is, of course, a support for our initiative, because we want to get the best value for the time and the funding we invest. And, we are very proud, and we also want to think out of the box. And usually that is easier to talk to the stakeholders directly. I'm sorry, I have a very strong echo, so I have a bit of problem hearing.
It's breaking up a bit. It's breaking up a bit indeed. But you're mentioning a very specific population fleeing conflict, coming with a very traumatic experience, and not necessarily willingly coming to Europe, but trying to find a safe refuge in Europe. Could we just spend a moment on that? And I would like to go to Bristol first, maybe, because at the end of the day, a city is not the place where such refugees would want to necessarily go. No one necessarily wants to go to Bristol in this specific scenario, but are maybe channeled to Bristol. How do you see then your role in terms of welcome, and in terms of also maybe building a sense of community at city level, which is probably more important than national or European level?
I think it's really very important for us. We have an infrastructure already in place in the city, working with the local authority, faith communities and civil society organizations, dedicated to ensuring that whoever arrives in our city, they are welcomed. We make sure that accommodation provision is made available. And I have to thank many of our citizens, because we reach out to the city and people have made available their homes, or if they have second homes, people have kind of donated their homes to enable those families and all those individuals to come. So we've taken Syrian resettlement program, unaccompanied minors, and again, remembering we are a city where the Polish and Somali communities are now our largest migrant refugee communities in the city, and so we already have the experience of welcoming and supporting the migrant communities. I think what we need to, for Bristol, it's really important that their experience within their host communities or within the city, it's really of primary importance to us, because belonging is what is about relationships and day-to-day community life. So the work that we're doing both in the city and alongside our partner cities, and indeed through the Values Project, is learning from each other and putting in place really good practice to ensure that we are really embedding those communities within the city. I think
you can feel Bristolian even if you don't have a British passport.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
I have a question here which I would like to pick up from the Slido, which I think is very important, and maybe a first reaction from Johannes and then Damien. Does the topic of enabling legal migration have the same importance as preventing illegal immigration, especially with regard to the new pact? Maybe first Johannes and then Damien.
Yes, it's not the number of pages of legal text that determines the importance of a subject, but the pact focuses on things like the reforming the Dublin regulation and other matters, border protection and so on, because that's where among member states after 2015 and in 2016 we couldn't find an agreement. We couldn't find a compromise on how solidarity in the European Union in this area is organized. So we focus on that aspect of responsibility and solidarity among member states to share the burden. So I would say that the emphasis clearly is on that and not on legal migration. Second point, on these matters of recognizing whether somebody has a right to international protection, how people should be received, how people should be relocated among member states, and so on. We have a rather considerable book of European legislation. On legal migration, we have very, very little. We have now relaunched an initiative for the blue card, but for the rest, legal migration is a matter of national competence of individual member states, which explains why we say, particularly also from an economic and social angle, that migration is important for the European Union. Also, if you look at the demography of some of our member states, without migration, they won't grow, they will shrink. But legally speaking, in terms of competence, legal migration is almost entirely in the hands of our state. What we try to do is to help with financing, quite simply, pilot projects to, for organized circular migration, so that people come to Europe, get an education, training here, return back to their country to contribute. But as a legislator, our competence is rather limited.
Okay, you're breaking up a bit. Could we have maybe a short reaction also from Damien? I would like to get also that perspective on this illegal immigration, legal immigration. How do you see that balance?
It's true that there is no global European policy about legal and illegal immigration. So subsidiary protections are granted in really different ways in all member states in Europe. So I don't really know what would be legal and illegal migration. I don't like to make a difference between economic migrants, between war migrants, because today all studies show that today 40% of migration is climate migration, because climate change is already leading to migrations. For example, all the farmers that cannot cultivate their lands anymore, they go to Europe, even though they didn't want to leave their home country. When they see that they do not have opportunities anymore, they try and migrate to Europe. They are not under protection from the Geneva Convention. But I really wonder who would be considered as legal or illegal migrant. I think it's a really complex question. The idea of a fortress Europe is really a problem for integration. When we opened our borders in 1995 in Europe, that didn't lead to huge population movement within Europe. However, the country in Europe who has the most Polish migrants today here in Europe is Great Britain, even though they're not part of the Schengen agreement. So I think that opening our borders doesn't really have an impact on migration. And I think that we really need to work on that idea. We need to learn living with the idea. And I think that maybe the concept of legal or illegal migration will soon become invalid.
Okay, an open Europe, as open inside as outside. We're gradually heading to the end of this panel, so I would just like to have a last reaction from all of you. If I go to Asher, maybe, so I understand Bristol is signing the Integrating Cities Charter. Can you just tell us in a minute or so why that is so important for Bristol, and why do you think it's so important that cities commit to these principles of inclusion and equality?
Okay, so very quickly, I think the Integrating Cities Charter fits very well with Bristol's One City vision, which is to be a fair, healthy, and sustainable city, a city of hope and aspiration, where everybody can share in its success by 2050. Our city is outward-looking, diverse, international, and as I've explained already, we are a city of 460,000 people, 187 different countries, 91 languages spoken. However, our overall success does not reach everyone, and inequality is a key challenge for us in the city. And like many cities, this can be felt in particular by certain communities, including migrant communities and is exacerbated by challenges such as the pandemic. So the city has come a long way in building local cohesion by ensuring migrant communities are involved and included. And from our inclusion and equality strategies to our status as a city of sanctuary and of hope, we want to ensure migrant communities are supported and their voices are heard. However, there are still more to do to improve the integration of migrants and refugees at a local level. So by signing the Charter, it demonstrates our commitment in this area and to working with local, European and international partners to deliver inclusive policies. International problems need an international approach, which is why we are committed to building on our links around Europe and the world to learn from others and be the best that we can in a localized approach. We are also trying to learn the lessons from Windrush, which saw migrants arriving post-war in the UK from the Caribbean countries, wrongly detained, denied legal rights, and threatened with deportation. And it is imperative that we avoid a second Windrush after Brexit. As a city, we have a responsibility to support all those who are affected. And through the signing of the Integrated Cities Charter, we are very openly confirming our support for collaborative working with our European neighbours and maintaining those relationships post-Brexit.
Okay, thank you very much, Asha. You were a great panelist. Thank you for having been with us. May I go to Johannes for a 30-second soundbite just on your key recommendation to cities in this process to support the action plan that you've just published?
Thank you very much. Yes, very briefly, as was said by other speakers, make sure that the way we talk about this is not that we talk about a wave or a huge problem. We need to put it in relation to the reality it is, in relation to the challenges that are there. We need to be very honest about the challenges, but we also need to be very honest about the benefits and what migration can bring for our future. And my second message is that I'm very grateful for the organization of this event. We need more exchange of views also to understand better the problems we are trying to solve at our level in the cities, in the communities, in civil society. We need to make sure that we have also a dialogue with the migrants, not only in the cities, but also at the European level, in order to provide rational solutions to the challenges we face. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Johannes, for having been with us. You were also a great panelist. Thanks a lot for sharing your insights. I move then to Damien for your 30-second soundbite, please, on the importance of cities in this process and how they will be shaping the narrative.
Maybe a few words on that, but I think the debate is far from being over. I'm really optimistic. I think it's a huge challenge, but it's a beautiful challenge. I really believe in humanity. I really believe in my citizens. I think we need to promote integration. And as Johannes has just put it, we need to change the narrative, the migration narrative. If we do that, I think we can really achieve a reality where migration is not a problem anymore. We are able to share our spaces, our cities. So we need to focus on keep building inclusive cities. From the narrative to our actions, we need to really promote integration.
Thank you very much, Damien. You've all really highlighted the importance of words and terminology, and maybe that's just an action point in itself that we can take from this debate. So thank you also to you for having taken time. You were also a great panelist. Thank you to all of you. Elizabeth, you stay with me, and you will be not only doing the conclusions of the panel, but also reflecting a little bit on this morning's discussion. Elizabeth, also as the host city, Nuremberg. So please share your thoughts following this debate and today's discussions.
Thank you very much for giving me more than 30 seconds. This is great. And I have a few remarks to share with you. First of all, the subject of multi-level cooperation. I think this was what we wanted to talk about, and this is something we know has to be strengthened more and more. We know that cities have to be active to search for information, to keep themselves up to date, and to know what happens on the EU level, what happens in other cities and on the national levels. But the other levels can help us with that, because usually in cities we do not have specialized teams or resources to keep up with everything that happens on other levels. So we know we are responsible of our own, but we encourage especially the EU level to help us with this. I think you do that by giving information on new fundings, on new developments to us. But let's keep in touch and try to make it easier for sometimes smaller cities as well to get to the sources of funding and of information. And we like to hear about new forms of funding. Certainly, we will keep in touch with you to hear more about capacity building and other possibilities. You can be sure of that. The second point is language and communication. We have heard this from all of us, and I think this is a common point of view. We spoke about solidarity, which we missed in the European level, and about how discourses go, but we all are citizens and voters, so it's our own responsibility as well to encourage our own governments if we feel that the discourse about European borders or about migration politics is not what we would like to hear. So let's try to strengthen the voices of those who wish other words and other discourses on the topic of migration and integration. And we have ourselves to choose our words carefully. We heard about that as well. And we have to talk to each other with newcomers, old citizens, long-term inhabitants. So we have to talk. That's evident. The second remark is about what we have to do. We talked about different types of migrants or categories. I think it is important not to see types of people, but to see problems and circumstances. Monsieur Carême talked about it is a problem of poverty. So we have to speak about solving problems or tackling problems. We have to speak about education. You have to speak about access to housing, but not in terms of this group has a problem, but there is a problem and different kinds of people have this problem, and we have to speak about the problem with cross-sectoral approaches to integration, not always focus on migration as a problem, but focus on the special problems we have to solve on different levels where we are responsible. We have a great strength. We talked about resources, about volunteering, about civic engagement. I think this is something we have to keep in mind. Everybody having arrived recently or having been in our cities for generations has something to give, and often has the intention to give. So we have to not to look at volunteers helping migrants, but about helping people helping other people in all their diversity and whatever they have to give and to share with others. And last remark, cities often complain about decisions being taken on other political levels, and we not being able to influence what happens. This is, we will continue complaining about that, but we have an advantage. We are pragmatic, that's what was said as well, we face reality, and we can always say, everybody who is here is in our city and is welcome. I could quote the Nuremberg Christkind, which is a very famous symbolic person, who says in its opening ceremony that everybody who comes is welcome. So we do not have to solve the problem of our borders. We have to be involved and to take care what happens, but everybody who is in our city is welcome, and we try to live together. And so this is, in some way, this is easier because we are our community. That was my thoughts about what we discussed. Thank you all for being in Nuremberg virtually. Thanks for all who contribute to this panel and tomorrow to continuation of this discussion and this meeting. And I hope to see you all, and I hope Europe remains strong without COVID next year. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That's a nice symbol of Europe there that you're holding. It's a shame that it's covering your mouth, which is also the symbol of free speech. But oh well, that's just the silly times we're living in. That's much nicer. Okay, so that's it for today. I think we've had some really thought-provoking exchanges, which really set the scene already for tomorrow, where we will be joining at the same event page, same time, 10 a.m. So I hope you will be joining us. Tomorrow we will have a debate looking more into the stakeholder base. We will have representatives from different stakeholder groups discussing around the issues of integration at city level. So I hope you will be there to join us. And for now, I leave you then with our canvas drawing by Sophie, which symbolizes today's discussion. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. So as it's 12, a little bit after 12, at least here in Brussels, I say bon appétit to all of you and see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.